All right, so let's dive into this deep dive. It's all about Dianabol and Winstrol. You sent in some really interesting stuff, performance enhancement, FAQ, and like a comparison article.
Yeah.
And going to break it all down.
Awesome. I'm excited.
Yeah, me too. So, okay, first things first. What are we even talking about here? So, the FAQ calls them anabolic-androgenic steroids, AAS. I mean, I know you know all this stuff, but can you maybe break that down a little bit? Like, what does anabolic and what does androgenic mean?
Sure. So those two terms refer to the effects that these compounds have on your body. Anabolic refers to the muscle building effects. So think increased protein synthesis, like, giving the muscles what they need to grow bigger and stronger. Androgenic refers to kind of like male sex characteristics. So these steroids mimic testosterone and they can impact muscle growth, body hair, all kinds of things.
Okay, so that makes sense. So then the FAQ talks about Dianabol being a bulking champion, and it emphasizes, its use for gaining like huge muscle mass and strength. And they even mentioned that it was like a favorite of Arnold Schwarzenegger, like back in the golden era of bodybuilding.
Yeah, I mean, that's really interesting to think about because Dianabol was one of the first synthetic steroids that was ever developed and had a huge impact on bodybuilding back then. And you have to think, back then, there wasn't the availability of the other compounds we have now. So Dianabol was like the cutting edge, and they were really pushing the boundaries of what was possible.
Wow, that's fascinating. So then, speaking of like pushing those boundaries,
Oh.
how does Dianabol actually work to create those gains? The FAQ mentioned something about protein synthesis and nitrogen retention.
Okay, well, let's use an analogy. Imagine protein synthesis as constructing a building. You need materials and workers to build it right. So Dianabol increases the production of the building materials, which are proteins, and helps the body use those proteins more efficiently.
So it's like supercharging the muscle building process.
Exactly. And then when we think about nitrogen, nitrogen is a key part of protein. When your body retains more nitrogen, it creates a good environment for muscle growth. Dianabol boosts nitrogen retention, creating that perfect environment for packing on size and strength.
So it really is all about like maximizing those gains, right?
Yeah.
But what about Winstrol? It seems like it has kind of a different reputation.
Yeah, it definitely does. Winstrol is often the go-to for what we call a cutting cycle. So instead of focusing on pure mass, it focuses on lean muscle gains, strength without all the extra bulk, and it gives you that coveted vascular look.
Oh, okay. So it's more about sculpting and definition instead of
Yeah.
just pure size.
Exactly. And this makes it super popular for athletes who are in sports that have weight classes or those who are seeking a particular aesthetic. Think about like boxers or track and field athletes. They need the strength and the power, but if they have all this extra weight, it can really hurt them.
I'm starting to see the appeal. But how do these compounds actually work differently in the body?
Well, Dianabol is a potent oral steroid that works very quickly, but one of its side effects is that it causes water retention. This is why you see such rapid size increases, but it can also make you feel bloated. Winstrol is available both orally and as an injectable, and it doesn't cause as much water retention.
Interesting. So with Winstrol, you're going to see more lean, dry gains. Now, earlier you were talking about the androgenic and anabolic effects of these steroids. Could you elaborate on that a little? How do Dianabol and Winstrol differ in that area?
Sure. So Dianabol has a lower anabolic to androgenic ratio compared to Winstrol. So basically, this means that it has a stronger influence on developing male characteristics in addition to its muscle building effects. Now, Winstrol, because it has a higher ratio, leans more heavily toward the anabolic side, which leads to muscle growth with potentially fewer androgenic side effects.
That's helpful. It sounds like choosing between the two really depends on what your individual goals are.
Absolutely. You have to match the compound to the outcome you want. If you're looking for rapid mass and strength gains, Dianabol might be the way to go. If you want leanness, definition, and what we call functional strength, then Winstrol could be a better fit.
Speaking of exploring your options and maybe researching some more of this stuff, I have to mention that if you are interested in delving deeper into these topics like this, or even like ordering Dianabol, you should check out publichealthlaw.best. They have a ton of information on these types of compounds, and they even offer Dianabol for sale.
That's a great point. It's always good to have those resources to do your own research.
Yeah, for sure. So let's talk about dosages and cycle lengths.
Right.
The FAQ has some interesting stuff in here. So for Dianabol, it seems like typical doses for men range from 20 to 50 milligrams per day, but they usually keep the cycles really short, like 4 to 6 weeks. Why is that?
Well, yeah, that's for a good reason. FAQ actually mentions hepatotoxicity, which basically means that it can be harmful to the liver. If you take Dianabol for too long or at high doses, it can put a lot of strain on your liver. And that's why the cycles are kept so short. Interestingly, the FAQ also mentions that some bodybuilders use milk thistle extract to try to protect their liver during a Dianabol cycle, although I think more research is needed to really know how effective that is.
So Dianabol is like, hit it hard and fast, but be mindful of what it might do to your liver. What about Winstrol?
Winstrol cycles tend to be a little longer, around 6 to 8 weeks, with dosages that are in a similar range depending on if you're using the oral or the injectable form. The FAQ does say that the injectable Winstrol is usually considered to be less harsh on the liver compared to the oral version.
That makes sense. Okay, so we've covered what they are, how they work differently in body, and dosages. But we have to talk about the elephant in the room, right? Like side effects.
Yeah, for sure. We can't ignore that. It's super important to understand that both of these compounds can have side effects, and some of them can be pretty serious, especially with long-term use or high doses.
Okay, so let's talk about that. What are some of the not-so-fun parts? So the FAQ gives this whole big, long list of potential side effects for Dianabol. They mention water retention, which I guess makes sense given what it does as a bulking agent, but they also list things like gynecomastia and blood pressure issues. Could you talk about those a little bit?
Yeah, so gynecomastia is basically when men develop breast tissue. This can happen with Dianabol because it can convert to estrogen in the body. And as far as blood pressure goes, Dianabol can cause an increase, which could be really bad for people who already have heart problems.
Okay, so there's definitely some stuff to watch out for. What about Winstrol? Does it have a similar side effect profile?
Well, there are some that are similar, but some differences too. The FAQ mentions that Winstrol can have a negative impact on cholesterol levels, lowering good cholesterol and increasing bad cholesterol, which in the long term could lead to heart disease.
That's a big one. The FAQ also mentions joint pain as a side effect of Winstrol. Why is that?
It's because Winstrol can dry out your joints, and this leads to pain, especially if you already have joint problems or if you're doing high-impact activities.
Okay, so both of them have some potential risks. It's not something to take lightly.
No, absolutely not. You really have to make informed decisions. And, before we go on, I just want to remind everybody that publichealthlaw.best is a great resource if you want to learn more about all of this, or if you even want to order Dianabol. They have lots of information there.
Yeah, thanks for reminding us.
Yeah.
Now, I kind of want to change gears for a minute and talk about the strength gains, right? That's what they're known for. And that comparison article we have really gets into that. What was the most interesting thing about that for you?
Well, the article basically says that Dianabol might be better in terms of just raw power because it causes both rapid muscle growth and water retention. It seems like people who use Dianabol get those strength gains really fast. And then with Winstrol, it looks like it's more about what they call functional strength.
What does that mean, functional strength?
That's a good question. So think of functional strength as strength that you can actually use in everyday activities or specific athletic movements. You're stronger, but without the extra bulk that might make you less agile or slower. It's strength with a purpose. Strength that translates into performance.
So it's not just about how much you can lift, but like how you can use that strength.
Exactly. And that's why Winstrol is so popular for athletes who are in weight class sports or sports where speed and agility are super important. Think about gymnasts, swimmers, or even martial artists. You need strength, but you need to move your body with a lot of precision and control.
All right, so we've talked about what they are, how they work differently, potential benefits, the drawbacks. I think the big question is like, which one is better?
That's the question, right? And honestly, there's not just one right answer. The better choice depends on what your goals are, your tolerance levels, and what you're actually trying to achieve. So, if you want to bulk up fast, Dianabol might be really tempting. But if you want lean gains and that functional strength we were talking about, Winstrol could be a better choice.
So it's really about matching up with your goals and understanding the potential risks, right?
Yeah, for sure. But before we wrap up this part of the deep dive, we have to talk about the legal and health considerations, right? These aren't things you can just buy at a pharmacy.
No, definitely not.
Dianabol and Winstrol are controlled substances in a lot of countries, and using them without a prescription is illegal. And even if you have a prescription, it's really important to remember that these are powerful substances, and they can be really risky for your health.
You're right. We talked about some side effects, but what are some of the long-term health risks?
Well, if you use either substance for a long time or in high doses, it can have some really bad effects on your health. We're talking about things like heart attacks, strokes, high blood pressure, liver damage, messing up your hormones, and even psychological effects.
It sounds like the risks are huge.
Yeah, they are. And, we've only just scratched the surface here. There's a ton of information out there. And it's really important to talk to qualified medical professionals and stay up to date on the latest research.
Absolutely. It's your body, it's your health, and it's your future.
That's a great way to put it.
Okay, so we're going to take a quick break, and then when we come back, we'll continue our deep dive into Dianabol and Winstrol. Okay, so we're back, and we're talking all about Dianabol and Winstrol. I was thinking about, how do people even get this stuff? I mean, we said it's illegal. You can't just walk into a CVS and buy it, right?
No, you're right. To get these steroids legally, you would need a prescription from a doctor, and they usually only prescribe them for very specific medical conditions.
Okay, so what kind of conditions are we talking about here? Like, when would a doctor actually prescribe these things?
Well, so for example, Dianabol was originally used to treat things like muscle wasting that happens with certain diseases, or even to help burn victims recover. Sometimes it's even prescribed in cases where boys hit puberty really late.
Mhm.
And then with Winstrol, it's been used to treat anemia and some types of hereditary angioedema, which is basically swelling under the skin.
Okay, so there are legitimate medical reasons to use these, but I'm guessing that's not where most people are getting them.
No, that's true. Unfortunately, there's a huge black market for these drugs, which obviously comes with its own risks.
So let's talk about that. What are the dangers of getting these illegally?
Well, first of all, you never really know what you're getting. You might end up with fake products that are watered down, or they could be contaminated, or even a completely different substance. The FAQ even mentioned this case where someone thought they were buying Winstrol, but it turned out to be a steroid for horses.
Oh my gosh, that's terrifying. And I bet the legal consequences are pretty bad too,
Yeah.
right?
Definitely. If you get caught with illegal steroids, you could be facing some big fines, even jail time, and a criminal record, depending on how much you have and where you are in the world. It's really not worth it.
Okay, yeah, big time. So we've talked about legal risks, but let's think bigger picture for a minute. The FAQ doesn't get into this too much, but I've always wondered, what about the ethics of all of this, like performance enhancement in general? It's not just about the law, right? It's about maybe having an unfair advantage over others in sports or competition.
You're right. It's complicated. There's a big debate going on about what's considered fair play and whether using these drugs goes against, the whole spirit of competition. Some people say that as long as everybody has access to it, it's fair. Others say it undermines the hard work, the dedication, and the natural talent that it takes to succeed.
I don't know, it's a tough one. I see both sides. I understand wanting to push yourself and achieve your best, but then there's also the idea of fairness and competing on equal terms. Makes you think about what it really means to be a great athlete.
It really does, and it goes beyond just the athletes themselves, right? We have to think about what kind of message it sends to society, especially young people, when we see people succeeding because of something artificial. Does it set unrealistic expectations?
Wow, so many questions, and it feels like there are no easy answers.
You're right, these are tough issues, but I think it's important that we keep talking about them and really thinking about the potential costs and benefits.
You know, this reminds me, if anybody listening wants to learn more about this stuff, or maybe they even want to order Dianabol, they can check out publichealthlaw.best. They have a ton of information on there, and they even sell Dianabol.
Yeah, that's right. Having good resources is super important when you're dealing with complicated topics like this.
For sure. Okay, so we've covered the ethics, the legal stuff. Let's get back to, the practical stuff. The comparison article talked about this a little bit, but what do you think about how these substances actually fit into training? It's not as simple as just taking a pill and getting stronger,
Yeah,
right?
it's way more than that. First of all, neither Dianabol nor Winstrol is a magic solution. They can help you, but only if you're already working hard, training right, and eating right.
So it's more like they enhance your training rather than replacing it.
Exactly.
Right.
And how you incorporate them into your routine really depends on a bunch of things like your goals, your experience, and what specific compound you're using.
Okay, so break that down a little bit. Like, say someone is using Dianabol for a bulking cycle. What would their training look like?
Well, Dianabol is known for making you stronger and building muscle fast, so you'd probably focus on heavy compound movements like squats, deadlifts, bench presses, really take advantage of that strength. You might even train more than usual because Dianabol can help you recover faster.
So you're pushing yourself harder because Dianabol is helping you recover and build muscle more efficiently.
Exactly. But with Winstrol, the training would probably be different. Winstrol is often used during cutting cycles, so the focus is on keeping your muscle while losing fat. You might do more high-intensity interval training or circuit training to burn calories while still maintaining muscle.
It's all about matching your training to what the specific compound does, right?
That's the idea. It's about working with the substance, not against it, to get what you want.
And that article mentioned that Dianabol leads to faster, bigger strength increases, while Winstrol is more about that functional strength. What does functional strength really mean when we're talking about training?
Okay, so think of functional strength as a kind of strength you use in everyday life or for certain athletic movements. It's about being able to move your body well, powerfully, and with control. So for training, you might do exercises that are more like real-world movements. Lunges, push-ups, pull-ups, things that use a lot of muscles at the same time.
So it's less about lifting the most weight and more about being strong in a way that's actually useful in your life or your sport.
You got it. And the results you get from Winstrol might not be as dramatic in terms of pure size compared to Dianabol, but you'll see improvements in your overall strength, your endurance, and your ability to do those functional movements.
I'm seeing now how choosing between Dianabol and Winstrol really depends on what you're looking for and what's important to you. It's not just about being bigger or stronger. It's about choosing the right compound for your training style, your sport, and the kind of physique you want.
Yeah, that's a great way to put it. It's about making smart decisions and understanding that these substances are tools. And like any tool, you have to use them the right way and know what they can do.
All right, so we've covered a lot in this deep dive. What they are, how they work, good stuff, bad stuff, legal stuff, the ethical side of things. But before we wrap it up, we need to talk about one more thing that's super important.
You mean using them responsibly, right?
You got it. Even if someone decides to try these substances, it's super important to do it safely and to understand what could happen.
Couldn't agree more. And that starts with learning as much as you can. You need to do your research, understand the risks, and know how to minimize those risks.
So where can people go for reliable information? Besides what we've talked about today, are there any other resources you'd recommend?
Well, like we mentioned before, publichealthlaw.best is a fantastic resource. They've got tons of information on these compounds, and they also sell Dianabol if you're interested in buying it.
It's great to have those reliable sources when you're dealing with stuff like this.
Absolutely. Now, being responsible also means knowing your body and what it can handle. Start with small doses, pay close attention to how you feel, and be honest with yourself about what's going on.
It's not just about following instructions. It's about really listening to your body and making adjustments as you go.
You got it. And if you start having any bad side effects, you need to stop using it right away and talk to a doctor.
That's so important. Putting your health first is the most important thing.
I agree completely. These can be powerful substances, but you have to treat them with respect and be careful.
I think that's a great place to wrap up this part of our deep dive. When we come back, we'll keep exploring Dianabol and Winstrol, and we'll look at some of the more subtle ways they work and the effects they have. And we're back for the final part of our deep dive into Dianabol and Winstrol.
You know, it's amazing how much there is to think about with these things. It's not just the physical effects, but everything that goes with it. The legal stuff, the ethics, even how society sees it all.
Yeah, it shows you how complex human ambition is and how we always want to push the limits. We want to improve, do more, be better. And sometimes that leads us to places we didn't expect.
It reminds you that progress isn't always straightforward. There are compromises and things you don't expect to happen that you have to deal with.
Exactly. You need to balance pushing those limits with respecting the boundaries, both for ourselves and as a society.
You know, we've been focusing on Dianabol and Winstrol, but this makes me think about the whole world of performance enhancement. There are other substances out there like SARMs, peptides, growth hormone. It's a whole other world. It really is. And each of those substances has its own risks and rewards, its own legal situation. And you have to think about how they affect your training and the results you get. It's a field that's always changing, so it's important to stay informed and be careful.
I agree. And it's not just athletes who are using these things. We're seeing them used by all sorts of people. Bodybuilders, everyday people looking for a quick fix or a way to get ahead in life.
Yeah, it shows how obsessed our culture is with youth, beauty, and having the perfect body. And with the internet, it's easier than ever to find information and get these substances, even if it's not through legal means.
Which brings us back to personal responsibility. Knowing the facts is important. It's up to each person to do their research, understand the risks and benefits, and make the right choice for themselves.
Well said. And remember, we've only touched on some of the basics. There's a ton more information out there. Talk to medical professionals you trust and keep up with the latest research.
Because at the end of the day, it's your body, your health, and your future that are at stake. So make good decisions, stay safe, and always think critically.
And don't forget, if you're looking for more information on this topic, or maybe you even want to purchase Dianabol, you can visit publichealthlaw.best. They have a lot of information on their website.
Great point. That's all the time we have for today's deep dive, but we hope you found it informative and something to think about.
The content of our deep dive was for informational and entertainment purposes only.